Have you ever stopped to really think about something so foundational, so, ingrained in our lives that we almost take it for granted?
Mm,
I'm talking about the state.
mm.
We live in them, right? They govern so much of what we do.
Absolutely.
But what is a state, actually? It's a concept that's surprisingly complex and, well, as we'll find out, quite debated.
It truly is. And today, we're taking a deep dive into exactly that, the concept of the state.
Okay?
Our mission, really, is to examine how this fundamental idea has been understood through history, what its essential components are,
Right.
and crucially, how it relates to other big ideas like society, government, and the very notion of a nation.
So we're cutting through some of the jargon.
Exactly. We're trying to cut through the academic complexities you find in our source material
Mm-hmm.
and give you a clear, well-rounded understanding, hopefully, with some real aha moments about this crucial political concept.
Okay, let's get into it. So, for a long time, the concept of the state was absolutely central to political theory. You had thinkers like R.G. Gettle,
Right, back in 1949.
defining political science as simply the science of the state. And even earlier, J.W. Garner, in 1928, claimed political science begins and ends with the state.
Wow, pretty definitive.
Totally. It was considered the alpha and omega, the sort of be-all and end-all of the field.
It sounds incredibly rigid, doesn't it? What's fascinating, though, is that despite this traditional importance, some modern political theorists,
Hmm.
particularly those leaning into what's called the behavioral approach, they focus more on observable actions.
Right, not abstract concept.
Exactly. They actually suggested abandoning the concept of the state entirely.
Really? So why push back so hard against something so central? What were their reasons?
Well, they had a few key objections. First, they argued that the term state is too formal, and real politics, it often transcends any neat formal organization.
Okay, so it's messy in reality.
Pretty much. Second, they felt that if you define the state by its ends, its goals or purposes, it drags political analysis into moral philosophy.
Away from the facts on the ground.
Kind of, yeah. Away from the concrete reality of how politics actually works. And their third point was that the concept seemed to assume a very specific type of organization.
Like the modern Western state.
Sort of, yeah. One that excluded what they called pre-state or stateless societies, which suggested maybe political organization isn't universal in that specific form.
So it almost felt like an incomplete tool for understanding the full picture of global political reality.
Precisely. And David Easton, in his 1953 work Political System, really hammered this ambiguity.
What did he say?
He observed how one person sees the state as the embodiment of the moral spirit, another as the instrument of exploitation, just completely different takes.
Polar opposites, almost.
Right. He noted how varied the perceptions were and ultimately concluded that the word state ought to be abandoned entirely because it was just too ambiguous.
Talk about a strong opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But clearly that didn't happen. Despite these objections, the concept never really became redundant.
No, it didn't. Marxist political theory, for instance, kept using terms like slave-owning state, feudal state, capitalist state, and socialist state.
Right. They needed the concept for their analysis.
Absolutely. And even more mainstream, liberal, empirically oriented scientists saw a renewed interest, especially with the whole idea of start building in developing societies after decolonization.
Okay.
And this led to a really significant shift in the 1980s, this movement called bringing the state back in.
Ah, yes, I've heard of that. Skakel was involved.
That's right. T. Skocpol is a key figure. And the crucial idea here was redefining the state not just as a static institutional structure, like a set of rules, but as an active agent of shaping and reshaping society.
Okay, what did it mean for the state to be an active agent? What difference did that make in practice?
Well, it meant scholars started focusing on how states proactively do things. Implementing specific economic policies, building welfare systems, actively trying to shape national identity.
So not just a referee, but a player on the field.
Exactly. Rather than just being a passive arena for political struggles, this marked a real turning point in how we understand power and governance, acknowledging the state as this dynamic force.
So after some existential doubts, the state was recognized as too fundamental to ignore, and our understanding of it actually deepened considerably. Given its undeniable persistence, then how have thinkers actually managed to define this often elusive concept? Where do we start?
Well, the contemporary concept, the one we mostly use now, really owes its origin to Niccolo Machiavelli.
Ah, Machiavelli.
Ah,
Early 16th century.
that's right. In The Prince, back in 1513, he famously defined the state simply as the power which has authority over men.
Short and sweet.
And groundbreaking, because it focused squarely on the nature of the state, its raw power, rather than its moral or ethical ends, which had traditionally been the focus. What is the state for versus what is the state?
Right, a shift from purpose to mechanism.
Right.
And that focus on the nature and means of the state led to one of the most influential definitions, didn't it, from Max Weber?
Oh, absolutely. Max Weber's sociological definition from around 1920 is probably the most widely acknowledged.
Oh, again?
He stated, "A state is a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory."
That phrase, monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force, you hear that all the time.
It's absolutely key. Weber's genius was emphasizing that the state's defining characteristic isn't what it aims to achieve, its ends, but how it operates.
The means.
The means. Through its unique control over physical force, and critically that this force is seen as legitimate by the people it governs. That legitimacy part is vital.
Yeah, without legitimacy, it's just coercion, right? And other thinkers picked up on this.
They did. R. M. McIver in The Modern State highlighted how the state embraces all people in a territory, maintains order through government, speaks with the voice of law, and crucially, has that exclusive investment with the final power of coercion.
Okay.
And Harold Laski, in an introduction to politics, made a great point distinguishing the state from other groups.
How so?
He said other associations are voluntary. You choose to join a club or a church. But once he is a resident of some given state, legally he has no choice but to obey its commands.
You're automatically subject to its rules.
Exactly. He called the state the crowning point of the modern social edifice, supreme over everything else. And Frederick Watkins added the emphasis on sovereignty, the supreme lawmaking authority.
Right. So pulling all these threads together, Jeffrey K. Roberts offered a sort of working definition in 71.
Yes, a pretty comprehensive one. He defined it as a territorial area in which a population is governed by a set of political authorities and which successfully claims the compliance of the citizenry for its laws and is able to secure such compliance by its monopolistic control of legitimate force.
A bit of mouthful, but it really captures those core ideas.
Yeah.
Territory, population, government, authority, compliance, and that Weberian monopoly on legitimate force.
It does. And summarizing all these nuanced perspectives, it's customary now to identify the state by 4 constituent elements. These are really the pillars.
Population, territory, government, and sovereignty.
Those are the 4.
Okay, let's break those down. First up, population. Seems obvious it's a human institution, so you need people.
Right. But it's not just any random group. There needs to be some level of interdependence, a consciousness of common interests, maybe a general regard for common rules and institutions.
Does the size matter?
Not really fixed, no.
Oh.
But some level of self-sufficiency is generally seen as important for stability. And crucially, a point often misunderstood.
Yes.
A homogeneous population, meaning everyone sharing the same race, religion, language, or culture, is not an essential feature of the modern state. Think about it. Most states today are incredibly diverse.
That's a very important point. Modern states are built on diversity, often. Okay, second pillar.
Yeah.
Territory.
Absolutely essential. Unlike, say, a multinational corporation or a religious group that can span borders, a state must possess a fixed territory, a defined geographical area where its authority is accepted.
Right. Friedrich Engels pointed this out, didn't he? Contrasting state formation with nomadic tribes.
He did. He noted that state formation involves dividing the population by territory, which is different from nomadic groups held together by kinship ties who might move around.
And didn't someone argue against fixed territory being essential?
Yeah, John Seeley, an earlier writer, suggested nomadic tribes could be considered states, but that view is really no longer accepted. Nomadic tribes might have authority structures, but they lack that fixed, defined territory needed for statehood in the modern sense.
Plus, international law requires it now for recognition, right?
Exactly. International law is quite clear on the need for a defined territory. And territory isn't just the land under your feet.
What else does it include?
It includes the land, internal waters like rivers and lakes, the airspace above it, and typically extends about 3 miles out into the sea, the territorial waters.
And it's more than just geography. It symbolizes sovereignty.
It does. It provides resources, security, a sense of place, fosters patriotism, and helps bind diverse people together within those borders. Size isn't fixed. Demarcation can be geographical or political.
Okay. Third pillar, Government.
Another absolute essential. Garner called it the agency or machinery through which policies are made and common affairs are regulated.
So, if the state is the abstract idea,
Government is its concrete form. It's the entity that actually exercises the state's authority. It makes and enforces laws, runs the courts, maintains order, provides defense, manages currency, builds infrastructure, runs schools, hospitals, all that stuff.
without it, people are just a chaotic mess.
Pretty much. And this is a really important distinction we often blur.
State and government aren't the same thing.
Exactly. They are not coterminous. Governments can rise and fall. You can have elections, changes in leadership, even peaceful revolutions sometimes.
Without the state itself disappearing.
Right, as long as the established procedures for forming a government are generally followed. The state, the larger entity, persists. A state only truly loses its identity if it's suppressed by, say, an occupying power to the point where its own system for choosing a government is completely suspended.
That makes perfect sense. So the government commands our obedience day to day.
But the state commands our deeper loyalty. You can criticize or even oppose the current government.
And still feel allegiance to your state, your country. Because the government is just the administrative organ, right?
Precisely. Which brings us neatly to the final essential element, sovereignty.
The big one. Supreme power.
Essentially, yes. It denotes the supreme or ultimate power of the state to make laws and political decisions, and critically, to enforce them using that legitimate force we talked about. It's the state's final authority over its population and territory.
And while the government exercises sovereignty,
It technically belongs to the state itself. It's the source of the state's authority.
so it's why state commands are binding and considered superior to those of any other association or group within its borders. Like Weber said, the state is the sole source of the right to use violence.
And without sovereignty, a state simply ceases to exist. It loses its defining characteristic.
Now, what about international recognition? Sometimes people list that as essential.
That's a common point of confusion. Our sources are pretty clear. International recognition is an outcome or a consequence of a state possessing sovereignty and the other elements. It's not a precondition for existence.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about Bangladesh after its War of Independence, or the People's Republic of China for many years, or even the USSR initially. These entities clearly existed as states. They had population, territory, government, and exercised sovereign power, even though some other countries delayed formally recognizing them.
Ah, I see. So recognition is important politically, but doesn't define statehood itself.
Exactly. It flows from statehood.
Okay, great clarification. So with these four pillars, population, territory, government, sovereignty firmly in mind, let's dig into some critical relationships, starting with the state and society. Why is it so vital to distinguish between them? You mentioned preventing authoritarianism.
Yes, it's crucial for both scientific precision and for safeguarding liberty. If you equate the state with society, you basically hand the state, and by extension, the government potential control over every aspect of human life.
Which is dangerous.
Extremely. The state is often described as society politically organized. It fulfills that specific need for binding laws, order, security. But society is much, much broader. It encompasses everything that fulfills all their needs of life, from cradle to grave.
So society came first.
Absolutely. Society is primary. It existed long before the modern state. You can arguably live without a state, but humans can't really live without society.
So society includes families, churches, businesses, clubs, friendships, customs, all the ways we interact.
Exactly. And the state, as McIver put it, primarily regulates the outstanding external relationships of men in society. It sets the framework, maintains order within that broader social fabric.
And blurring that line leads to?
Well, the danger is complete subordination of the individual and all social life to the government. History shows that identifying the state with society has led to socially disastrous consequences.
Okay. And similarly, let's reinforce the distinction between state and government again. Government is essential, but not the same thing.
Right. We touched on this, but it bears repeating. Government is an element of the state. It's administrative machinery. McIver, in The Web of Government, used a great analogy.
What was that?
He said, when we speak of the state, we mean the organization, of which government is the administrative organ. Every social organization must have a focus of administration, but the organization is greater than the organ.
The state is the whole body. The government is like the brain or the hands carrying out actions.
That's a good way to put it. The government commands obedience to laws. The state, ideally, commands loyalty. You can dislike the current government intensely.
But still feel patriotic or loyal to the state itself.
Precisely. How have different political theories viewed this relationship?
Well, you have stark contrasts. Idealist theories, like Hegel's, tended to see no real distinction. They almost deified the state, viewing it as the march of God on earth.
Which is a dangerous path.
Yes, demanding complete subordination. Liberal democratic theory, on the other hand, is generally more rational. It sees the state more as reflecting the will of society, with government being responsible to the people, and importantly, acknowledging government fallibility.
Right, you can change the government if it fails.
Exactly. And then there's Marxist theory, which views government purely as an agency of the state, serving the dominant economic class. The state itself is seen as an instrument of class exploitation.
Which leads to their call for the eventual withering away of the state in a future communist society.
Right. Such fundamentally different ways of seeing the state-government link. Now, let's shift gears slightly to the modern identity of the state, which so often takes the form of the nation-state. We use terms like national frontiers, national interest, international relations all the time. But what's the actual difference between a nation and nationality? They sound very similar.
They do, but the distinction is important. Nationality is often seen as a narrower concept, typically based on shared objective characteristics like common race, language, religion, or culture. It can sometimes lead to tension or division within a state if different nationalities feel marginalized.
Okay, so nationality is about shared background.
Often, yes. A nation, however, tends to grow on a much wider, more subjective base. It usually refers to people living within a defined territory who feel united by common political aspirations, shared history, common interests, and maybe a sense of common destiny.
Even if they come from different backgrounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even if they belong to different nationalities or ethnic groups in that narrower sense. A nation allows diverse groups to feel united as citizens of the same state. Think of the US or India, many cultures, one nation politically.
That broader understanding really underpins the principle of national self-determination, doesn't it? Championed by Wilson, Lenin, upheld by the UN.
Yes, that principle was hugely influential, especially after World War II. It led directly to the establishment of many new nation-states as empires dissolved, and it shaped the development of modern international law.
But it hasn't been smooth sailing, especially for developing countries.
No, not at all. For many post-colonial countries, nation-building, forging that sense of common identity and political aspiration among diverse groups has been a gigantic, ongoing task.
And they face other challenges, too.
Absolutely. They often face the persistent challenge of neocolonialism. This isn't direct rule, but a more subtle economic exploitation by advanced nations.
How's that work?
Through things like unfavorable trade terms, conditions attached to foreign aid that benefit the donor, multinational corporations extracting resources, and the brain drain where talented people migrate to richer countries, depleting the developing nation's potential.
It's a really complex and often unfair reality. And we also see situations where the nation and the state don't align neatly, right?
Definitely. The ideal of the perfect nation-state is often messier in practice. You have nations scattered across different states, like the Kurds in Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria.
Right.
Or you have states containing multiple distinct ethnic or national groups that haven't really assimilated into one single nation, leading sometimes to instability or conflict. Think of Lebanon, Cyprus, or the breakup of the former USSR and Yugoslavia.
And what about migrants?
That's another layer. You have migrants who become citizens of a new state but retain strong loyalties and connections, maybe even political identities linked to their country of origin. The example often given is the Chinese diaspora contributing significantly to China's advancement.
So the neat lines on the map don't always capture the full complexity of identity and belonging.